If you're wanting a family SUV that looks and feels like you're balling on a budget, there are now plenty of options out there. GWM's Haval H6 has been a solid choice for a number of years now, thanks to its appealing price tag and the amount of high-tech kit on offer. However, it's just been updated, inside and out. There are fresher looks, new powertrain options, and a revised trim level structure. Stick with me as I dissect this Toyota RAV4 and Kia Sportage rival and let you know whether it's worth buying. Ready to get into it? Let's go. GWM has scaled back the trim levels the Haval H6 is offered in with this update. There is now only Luxe and Ultra available. Pricing for carryover variants, like this car here, is down by up to $2,000. It's worth noting that we have the Haval H6 Ultra Hybrid here, which is the flagship hybrid trim. As standard, all Haval H6 variants get 19-inch black alloy wheels, automatic LED headlights, a 10.25-inch digital instrument cluster, larger 14.6-inch touchscreen multimedia system, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, synthetic leather upholstery, and an electrically adjustable driver's seat. Stepping up to the Ultra trim, you get features like a panoramic glass sunroof, rear privacy glass, a head-up display, heated steering wheel, as well as heated and ventilated front seats. This is a lot of standard kit, especially given the asking price is considerably cheaper than a similarly spec'd Toyota RAV4, Kia Sportage, or Hyundai Tucson. For the full specification details, read my detailed written review at carsguide.com.au. In terms of design, GWM has massaged the looks of the Haval H6 with this update. Up front, there is a new grille that does look eerily similar to the Hyundai Palisade, don't you think? Another change is the daytime running light setup. The headlight unit is technically the same, however, there's a new section that spills down the front fascia. It looks a little tacked on to me, but it does give a little bit of difference compared to the outgoing model. Around the side, GWM has added more black cladding around the wheel arches and the door sills. There are fewer chrome accents, thankfully. Instead, there are black accents around the window sills and the roof rails. This helps make the Haval H6 more modern and contemporary. I'm a big fan. At the back is where some of the biggest changes are most noticeable. Overall, the tailgate design has been made to look more sharp and angular. There's a body line that continues all the way from the side and cuts just under the rear window. Another big change is the LED full width light bar is gone. In its place are two traditional taillight units. I'm so thankful car brands are starting to move away from the full width light bar setups because they look so generic now. Lastly, the badging has been tidied. There's now GWM where Haval once was. Inside, there have been even more changes. One of the most noticeable is this. It's an inclusion of a cream synthetic leather option. It's not to my personal tastes, and it also wouldn't be something that I'd recommend to a family, but it's a nice alternative to the drab black. Another is this. The leather-wrapped steering wheel is thicker than before, and it now features sculpted indentations on the 10 and 2 o'clock marks. It's nice, it's a good step in the right direction, but I preferred the thin steering wheel of the pre-update car, and the spokes at these 2 marks is still too thick and highly positioned. The screen-heavy approach in the Haval H6 continues with this update. There's now a larger 14.6-inch unit in the center that looks like a big iPad mounted on the screen. Moving down, there's a redesigned center console. It no longer features the rotary gear selector. This is now behind the steering wheel. This change has allowed for a much more open center console space. It looks a little like the Leapmotor C10. Overall, it looks and feels like there's a high level of quality inside. This ranges from the soft touches here on the dashboard to the rubberized section here in the center. It's pretty good for a car that's so affordable. In terms of practicality, both the front seats are electrically adjustable. The driver's seat in particular offers 6 ways of electric adjustment, including lumbar support. The seat itself is pretty comfortable. Though on longer drives, I am looking for a little bit of extra thigh support. I'm thankful, however, because both seats offer both heating and ventilation, plus the steering wheel is heated, which is a godsend in this cold Melbourne weather. Speaking of the steering wheel, while the buttons on here are the same as the pre-update model, their functions have changed. There's now no longer a cruise control stalk. Instead, you control this directly on the steering wheel. Another change is there are no longer buttons that purely control the volume. Instead, if you click this button here, those buttons change what's on the digital instrument cluster. This can take a little bit to get used to, but I'm sure if you did own the car, you would. Because the gear selector has been moved behind the steering wheel, this means that the wipers are now on the indicator stalk. As a result, there is no real way or stalk to adjust the headlights. Instead, you either need to use the touchscreen or there's an auto button on the dash. The digital instrument cluster now has updated graphics, though it still looks rather dark and I would love to see some more customization. Moving across, this 14.6-inch touchscreen looks fantastic. The native user interface is easy to navigate thanks to the shortcut buttons on the right-hand side as well as the swipe down control center menu. There is now wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is great because the USB-A port to access wired forms of this is still on the passenger side. Another gripe is when you're using wireless smartphone mirroring, you can't access the handy swipe down control center menu. There aren't many buttons here up front. Instead, there are only a few for select climate control functions. If you want to change the temperature, you either need to use the touchscreen or ask the voice assistant, which isn't always intuitive. In terms of storage up front, it has been improved massively thanks to this relocated gear selector. Highlights include 2 cup holders, a wireless charger, and a handy little section for your keys. Other bits of storage include this really big section under the center console, a center armrest box, a glove box, and 2 large door pockets. Moving to the second row, this is where Chinese SUVs just like this shine the most. I'm 182 centimeters tall and I've got heaps of legroom, and headroom isn't too bad either given I have this large panoramic sunroof. For the bench itself, it's fairly comfortable and laid back. You could easily get 3 people in the back here thanks to the low center tunnel. In terms of amenities, there are air vents, a USB-A and USB-C port, as well as a fold-down armrest with some cup holders. At the back, there's a hands-free power tailgate that opens and closes just like that. In terms of the boot space itself, it's fairly decent. There's 560 litres with the rear seats upright. There's also no load lip, which allows you to load things in and out with ease. There are a few hooks, a 12-volt socket, as well as a load cover. Unfortunately, however, there's no spare wheel under the boot floor. Instead, there's only a tyre repair kit. This isn't surprising, however, as this car is a hybrid and there's a high voltage battery pack in its place. The powertrain in the GWM Haval H6 Hybrid remains unchanged with this update. It's still powered by a 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol engine with an electric motor. Total system outputs are a massive 179 kilowatts of power and 530 newton meters of torque. This is mated to a dedicated hybrid transmission with drive sent to the front wheels only. Alrighty, we're behind the wheel of the updated GWM Haval H6 Hybrid. First up, let's talk about the engine. It's technically unchanged compared to the pre-update model. It has a 1.5 litre turbo petrol engine, an electric motor, and a dedicated hybrid transmission. When you first start driving, the engine typically turns on to get the fluids warmed up. Once it reaches an operating temperature, however, it does turn off, allowing you to drive on electric power alone. I've been surprised just how much I've been able to drive this car on electric power alone. There have been moments where I've accelerated from 0 to 60 on electric power alone, and then other moments where I've been coasting along at 80 k's an hour and the engine also switches off. Once the battery charge does get lower, or you punt the accelerator just that little bit harder, the engine does turn on. You don't necessarily feel it through the accelerator, although you can hear it a little bit. It's nowhere near as loud and drony as a RAV4 Hybrid, however. With 179 kilowatts and 530 newton meters of torque, that is a lot for a car that's just front-wheel drive. In practice, however, acceleration is quite linear, although if you accelerate hard out of a corner, don't be surprised if the wheels get a little overwhelmed. There are 3 levels of regen braking, including another for one-pedal driving, which is quite rare for a hybrid. For the majority of my driving, I've stuck with the normal regen mode because it feels the most natural. Braking in this car is quite linear. There's no awkward interaction between the regen and the traditional friction brakes like some hybrids. For the steering, there are also 3 modes. I'm a bit like Goldilocks though, as I like the medium mode the best. Comfort felt a little too light, whereas Sport is just a bit too firm. There's a little more feel through the wheel, although it's nowhere near as direct as some of its rivals. For the suspension, this is probably one of the car's weak spots. It's generally set up for comfort, which means when you hit harder bumps, it can duck around and wallow a bit. This is made worse out at higher speeds, where if you hit continuous bumps, it can act a little bit like a boat. On the safety front, this car continues to shine. There is a fantastic surround view camera, front and rear parking sensors, as well as a handy semi-autonomous parking function. However, this car is on the upper limit of what I would call a mid-size SUV, and it does feel like it when you park. The turning circle isn't small, so expect to do a fair few 3-point turns in tight car parks. In terms of visibility, this is another one of the car's weak spots. The bonnet sits quite high, and although you have an elevated driving position, it feels like you're in the car rather than on it. And then out the back, the rear envelope is still quite small. For some of the safety features, there are fewer bings and bongs this time around, which I really like. However, there are still some, one in particular for the speed limit assist. But there's no driver attention monitor like other newer cars, which means fewer bings and bongs. Also, the lane keep assist is nowhere near as intrusive as it was previously, which means it won't tug at the steering wheel near as much. Lastly, let's talk about NVH, which stands for noise, vibration, and harshness. At low speeds, this car is really quiet. On EV mode, it barely makes any sound at all. Under 20 k's an hour, the car does emit a noise so pedestrians know what you're doing. It doesn't annoy me particularly, but some of my passengers were annoyed by it, and I can see why. It is a bit of an annoying drone. Out on the open road, however, this car is still quiet. You perhaps notice it more due to the lack of engine noise, but overall, this is super quiet. GWM claims the Haval H6 Hybrid consumes a combined 5.2 litres per 100 kilometres. During my testing, I matched this claim, which is pretty much as good as a RAV4 Hybrid. There's a 61 litre fuel tank, which is the same as regular petrol variants. It can take a minimum of 91 RON regular unleaded petrol. According to GWM, the H6 Hybrid has a total range of 1,000 kilometres, though using my as-tested fuel consumption, you can get a theoretical range of 1,170 kilometres. Now that is fantastic. The pre-update Haval H6 petrol and hybrid received a 5-star ANCAP safety rating back in 2022. It remains unclear if this will carry over to the updated model. As standard, there are 7 airbags, autonomous emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, adaptive cruise control, and a surround view camera. Stepping up to the Ultra gets you front parking sensors. It's strange that this isn't standard across the lineup. For the full safety details, read my detailed written review at carsguide.com.au. This car is covered by a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty, whereas the battery pack is covered by an 8-year unlimited kilometre warranty. Additionally, there's 5 years of roadside assistance, and the first 5 services have capped pricing. Logbook servicing is required every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, though the first service is required after 12 months or 10,000 kilometres. During the first 5 years of ownership, servicing the H6 Hybrid costs $2,145, which averages out to around $430 per service. That's not as affordable as some of its rivals. Mid-size SUVs now make up over 20% of new vehicle sales in Australia, and it's now becoming harder and harder for entrants to stand out from the crowd. Previously, the GWM Haval H6 wouldn't have been at the top of my shopping list. However, this update does have me second-guessing myself. It's more stylish inside and out, there are bigger and flasher screens, more ergonomic storage, and most importantly, it's still cut price. However, there are still some things that irk me. Most importantly is the reliance on the touchscreen for key features, another is the rear visibility, and one more is this car still feels a little cumbersome behind the wheel compared to some of its rivals. Thank you for watching. For more and to read my detailed written review, head to carsguide.com.au.